Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 267. And this week it is Terri's turn to share something. And I believe we're coming back with more dopamine. Am I right?
You are right, Daisy. I'm coming back with the episode number 2. This goes back to a series called Try This from the Washington Post. And what they do is it's kind of like a topic, and then they do maybe 3 or 4 kind of classes on it. And this is the second one in the series. I don't think I'm going to go over 3 and 4 because they're really specific to dopamine related to behaviors around your phone and things. And although this is where this started, I'm a little less interested in that. But the second episode is called How to Reset Your Brain's Reward System. So again, going back to that dopamine system. What I love about this, of course, is that it goes back to Anna Lembke, who is the author of Dopamine Nation, whose work I really just value. And I think she makes the dopamine concept very easy to kind of digest and think about changing.
Just some good imagery, doesn't she?
She does. And you know, as well as any listener probably knows, that I love Andrew Huberman, but anytime he does anything on dopamine, it is such a complex deep dive that I get lost. So I really love Anna Lembke talking about this. So this episode, again, really is focusing on how to get your dopamine at a good level again, so that it's not off kilter, that you're not going, you're not diving low and then having to seek the big highs and things. So she really talks about doing a reset, and she refers to it as an experiment. And I like that, just, it's not this prescriptive thing you have to do. It's an experiment. Go explore this. And that what she really encourages is eliminating the device or eliminating the substance or eliminating the behavior for 30 days. And I know sometimes when people hear people talk about a 30-day focus on something, they often think it's because it takes 30 days to build a new habit or whatnot. What she's really talking about is use the 30 days because this is really the amount of time it takes to go through the acute withdrawal of the first 10 to 14 days and then start to get to that place where you start to feel a little better.
Yeah.
So if you only do a 21-day reset or a 10-day reset, you're not really going to get through that whole process.
Yeah, it really is enough time. Well, it's a period of time that, although it in some ways feels like a long time, it also feels very manageable. Mm-hmm. And it does take you enough into the process to really see the difference. But it is very much the start of your journey, but it's enough time to see significant change.
Absolutely. And again, I think if any listeners have worked on dropping any specific problematic behaviors or substances or things, the first few days are really hard because it's habitual, obviously. And then you're going through dopamine withdrawals, which, as I said, the acute phase, day 10 to 14, we start to come out of that. And then after that, really, the goal is that our dopamine levels can really kind of reset and return to a level of homeostasis, which is more where we want to be. She talked about during that 30 days, you will go through a period where you feel worse. And this obviously is where so many of us struggle. We feel worse and we don't see any benefits yet. This, the cost-benefit ratio is really skewed for us. And she talked about it, you might experience anxiety, irritability, insomnia, depression, and craving when you give up a substance or you give up a behavior. And so these are really the normal symptoms of withdrawal. The nice thing about them is that they are time limited, but they're caused by the substance or the behavior. And where so many of us struggle is that we want that substance or behavior to make that feeling stop, and then we just keep the problem going. So Daisy, I think you and I may have talked about this at some times related to this book, but for anyone who hasn't read the book Dopamine Nation, just a really quick summary about Anna Lembke, the author. She went through a period of time where she was addicted to romance novels. And I think many of us almost can kind of laugh when we hear that and think, okay, well, there are far worse things I could be addicted to. But what she was recognizing is it was interfering in her life. And again, reading a romance novel isn't per se dangerous or super costly, but it was taking up time. She was reading while she was waiting for her patients to come to the room. And what she was noting is that she was starting to experience some of the anxiety and depression and things when she couldn't read, when she couldn't access them. So this is usually a good sign for us that we've got an issue with that behavior or that substance.
Yeah, I can remember listening to her talking about it. And before you know what it is she's going to talk about, you're expecting it to be, drugs or something sort of typical when they ask her, what it was that she withdrew from it. She says romance novels, and you're like, you're kidding me. But when she starts talking about it, it's really interesting actually, isn't it?
It is. Because we can become addicted to anything that gives us.
That it just goes to show. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. So based on the title of this specific episode, obviously she's talking about how are you going to reset that. And she recommends a fast, or what she calls an abstinence trial. And she really highlights that time is one of our most important commodities. And we spend a lot of time accessing and using the substance or the behavior that we have become addicted to. And so for some of us, this is when we recognize there's a problem, is that we can't get enough of it. We can't set aside enough time to use it or do it or obtain it or whatever. And so time is an important piece in this episode. So she talks about this strategy she refers to as self-binding, that we really need to set up literal and metacognitive barriers between ourselves and our drug of choice or our behavior of choice that is getting in the way. So this is what really allows us to put a pause between desire and consumption. So we need a barrier. We need cognitive barriers. We need physical barriers, because what many of us rely on instead is willpower. And especially when you think of most substances or problematic behaviors, willpower alone is not strong enough. We live in an environment that, if my addiction is sugar, it's everywhere and it's offered to me all the time. And, it's so prevalent that asking ourselves to rely on willpower is really not effective.
It's funny, willpower, isn't it? Because when you've got it, it feels so strong and you feel like you can do anything. And when it's working for you and you're in the right frame of mind and you've got everything, you've got all your ducks in a row that make willpower work, it feels like you can accomplish anything. And I've got this, which is, well, it's kind of good in a very limited way. But then it's even worse when it's not there, because you feel even worse about yourself, because you can compare the self you are now with the willpower self, and you beat yourself up even more because you know that when willpower's working, you can do it. And because we don't think rationally about it and reason with ourselves that willpower is fleeting. And yes, we had it when we were feeling good and everything was working, but that's why we had it. And we're not feeling so good now, and that's why it's not there. And so it's not you who's a terrible person because you can't summon this willpower that you had. But there's that mismatch, isn't there, between you just beat yourself up saying, well, I had it last week, so why can't I have it now? And it's a real struggle. I should just be able to turn it on and off. It's my mind. I should be able to control it.
Yeah, and I think so often we we do some misattribution of that power. We say it was willpower, but it really was probably more likely we were excited about this thing we were doing.
Good point.
The environmental cues were set up in such a way that the temptations were lower. Our big why was so front and center. It wasn't really willpower, but
good
there
point.
were other reasons why we were able to avoid it.
But we mislabel it for when we haven't got all those things.
Yeah.
I should just be able to use willpower.
Yeah. And then again, when we feel negative about ourselves, that is when we are most going to want that dopamine hit. So we're going to be most tempted to use the substance or the behavior again. So she goes through some things about self-binding, and I'm going to share my favorite example of self-binding.
I'm conjuring all sorts of images here.
So I talk a lot at TFM around our, seeking of dopamine through food and eating behaviors. So problematic food or just the act of eating and what purpose that serves for us. And I often go back to an example of this, and reading Dopamine Nation really helped reinforce this concept for me. Some of you know my former career began as a middle school English teacher. So I was an English major in college. And of course, we read the Odyssey. And at some point I taught ninth grade and we read a version of the Odyssey. And if you know the story at all, Odysseus is on his way home and he is warned about this island where there are sirens that sing, and the power of their song is so alluring that what happens, they're actually monsters, and the sailors are so lured by the song that they crash into the rocks of the island. So there are all these bones of all these sailors who have not made it. And so Odysseus is warned about this. And what he is told that he needs to do is to have all of his crew put wax in their ears so that they don't hear this song, so they can keep rowing. And that if he wants to hear it, he should be bound to the mast of the ship.
Right.
So he gives all of his crew wax to put in their ears so they can't hear. He can hear, but he is tied very tightly to the mast of the ship. And of course, while they get close to the sirens, the crew cannot hear it, so they keep rowing. And he can hear it, and he's so tempted, but he's struggling against these ropes so much that it actually cuts into him and everything. And he's trying to motion to his crew to cut him down, but they don't hear him because they have wax in their ears. So they see, as they pass, they see the monster and they see all the carcasses and things. So to me, this is the best example of self-binding. Knowing I'm going into a situation where I am naturally going to be tempted by these things, it will be hard to resist. How can I create a barrier? Now, I might need to tie myself to the couch or something, I guess, to avoid the kitchen. But this creating barriers, I think, is really important thing to do. So you might think about what ways, for example, if it is a food substance that I'm struggling with, I might need to drive a different way home from work so that I don't naturally pull into that same place where I procure that problematic food. For me, with eating, I actually only have a TV in my bedroom. I don't typically eat in the bedroom. So it's really easy that if I go watch TV, I am not eating. Those are separate activities. So things that help you, again, as she said it, distance yourself from, put some distance between the desire and the act of consuming or engaging, I think is really important. She also talked about the kind of danger that many of us fall into of cross addiction. When we decide we're going to stop doing this particular behavior or stop having this particular substance or whatever, we need to replace it with something because, again, time is a big commodity. And while I'm not using that or doing that, what will I do? And so we are often at risk of substituting in something else that's problematic, and we just develop an addiction there. And so being really mindful of that we don't just swap out one problematic behavior or substance for another. The interviewer asked her at some point about if doing this kind of pausing and things really can help us figure out the why. Why am I wanting to use this substance? And she actually cautioned not to lean too heavily on that. She said, of course, there will be some benefit to understand. Why am I wanting to eat right now? Why do I want to escape my environment right now to go read this romance novel or hop on my phone and scroll Facebook or whatever? She said, of course, there's some value to that. But the challenge is that it just creates another big task, and sometimes we don't know why. And what we really need to do is just create the barrier from doing the behavior or engaging. Sometimes once we create some of that distance from it, we can start to see the why, but not to wait for the why is really important. And I love that she said this, we already know why we're doing it. It's addictive. Addiction is why we're doing it. We don't have to go back to, in third grade when this thing happened. It's now an addiction. And so what we need to do is interrupt the pattern. Yes, there may be time for insight and figuring some of that other stuff out, but giving yourself the credit. I'm addicted to this. I'm having a hard time with this. I'm tempted by this because it's addictive.
The other thing that came to my mind there is you talk about finding your why a lot, don't you? And that being really important. Mm-hmm. And the thing that just struck me as you were saying that's almost like an anti-why, and a good example of when you shouldn't focus on it. Like you said, there might be time to reflect on it later to kind of figure things out and reinforce the new things that you're doing as a good reason why not to link it to that why. But actually, you don't want to be thinking too much about your why. We're thinking about a why in a negative sense here. Focusing on the why is reinforcing why you're doing that behavior and automatically putting your brain in that space of why you want to be doing that behavior. And that's exactly what you want to stop doing it, isn't it? So I just suddenly thought of it as this is like an anti-why. And we don't want to be thinking about our why for once.
Absolutely. And we don't want to be focused on the pattern that I'm already locked into. I want to be thinking about how I want to feel on the other side, what I want to move toward. And again, I think it's really helpful to use this kind of cut to the chase of why I want to use it is because I'm addicted to it. Now, what is triggering me in this moment? I'm uncomfortable for some reason. There's some level of distress or discomfort that makes me want to go to my addictive behavior or substance. That's all I need to know. I don't need to get to a deep-seated why at this point. And with that, she talks about the fact that boredom is typically the biggest complaint of folks who are first abstinent from a behavior or a substance. Again, because our patterns use so much time and occupy us in so many ways that once we cut the substance or the behavior, we're bored. And that is discomfort or distress. We don't like feeling bored. How will I address it? I'm going to pick up my phone again, or I'm going to go to the kitchen and get that thing, or whatever, again, our substance or our behavior is. The important thing, and I have shared this with you before, Daisy, and I talk about it a lot at TFM. I'm going to bring in another author for a second, and I really got this concept from Judson Brewer, who talked about kind of the reward value of our addictive behaviors or substances. And the challenge for us is that while we're leaning so heavily on the reward value of that behavior or that substance, we've minimized the reward value of other behaviors or substances. We don't get joy from them. We don't get that dopamine response. And that's why we're leaning into this one so much. And so if I stop this behavior or stop engaging in this substance or whatnot, I'm missing out on reward value. Again, I'm missing out on this dopamine. So the longer we can go in this abstinence without re-engaging, with our dopamine resetting, other things begin to increase in reward value.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
So let's say, for example, you used to really love to listen to music, but now you hardly even pay attention to music because you're really getting all of that kind of rescuing reward value from the problematic behavior or substance. While you're in this period of abstinence, you might start to notice, wow, I really like music. Wow, let me start spending some more time using that as something that fills my time, something that feels satisfying. But even as I say that, I also can be reminded of how easy it is then to suddenly be like, oh my gosh, I'm into everything music possible, and now I'm spending all my time on this focus. Obviously, that's not the end goal that we're working on, but we want to get to that place where we can start to feel positive about other things again. So it's kind of diminishing the reward value of the problematic behavior or substance and allowing ourselves to once again experience the positive of other things. That is that kind of recovery process. She then talks about something she referred to as the abstinence violation effect. I love how these psychiatrists talk. But basically, it's that, okay, I've gone without this behavior or substance for a period of time. I think I've got it licked. I think I'm good. So what did she do?
I wondered where you were going to go with that. Yeah.
So what did she do? She got out a romance novel and she binged it. And then she binged another one or whatever for the whole weekend. And what this really kind of helps us see is that we may have an inability to moderate the consumption of that behavior or substance, which again reminds us of its addictive qualities. This isn't about us. This is about this behavior or substance, and helps to remind us of why we need distance from it. Now, I hear this a lot in reference to sugar, probably the one I hear it about the most in my work. And that is, I've quit sugar before, but as soon as I had it, it was right back and maybe even worse. And it just reminds me that I think we all have to kind of navigate this. We probably knew that going into it, but it is so tempting to test it and see, can I handle it differently this time? Is this time going to be the time that it really stuck and it will be different? And some of us go through a number of rounds of that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think some of us find that at some point we have to do that honest check-in and say, look, I already know how this works. I've done this a number of times. It's not me. It is this substance or it is this behavior that as soon as I introduce it again, all of the challenges with it are back. Now, some people find with certain behaviors or certain things, they can moderate it differently after that period of abstinence. But I think we all have to have some system of kind of checking in honestly with ourselves. How many times have I done this? And how many times have I gone right back to the behavior or the substance as I did before? I think that's a really important thing to think about too. And then the last thing the two of them talked about in the episode was the idea of another form of self-binding, maybe not quite the way we would think of that term, but is that we might help ourselves navigate it by connecting, by telling someone else that we're doing it. You know, why do so many people find success in AA? Because they say it, they own it with other people. Anna Lemke talks about co-regulating with others is a great form of self-binding, because we tend to, you know, the old saying of you're going to take on the behaviors of the 5 people you spend the most time with or whatever. If I'm saying I need to be abstinent from alcohol, I can't keep engaging right now with people who are using a lot of alcohol and think that that's not going to affect me. But saying to someone else, I'm no longer drinking, and then not going to places or not engaging with them around alcohol, that social connection is an important piece for many of us in that self-binding, kind of creating that distance between the desire and the actual consumption.
And it can be so helpful. That's a great example. I'm thinking of, dry whatever month
January
comes up a lot, but dry January is a typical one, isn't it? Not the end of, but for a lot of people, it's the end of potentially quite a lot of alcohol consumption. Not the end of, but, the end of a period where we've been consuming quite a lot. And so dry January is typical. Veganuary is another one. It's not something I've taken part of, but I know a lot of people do. But it's very helpful, especially when you're thinking of something like not drinking. It's quite often something that you get sort of, those social connections are either a great excuse to have a drink, or you can almost, not exactly bullied, but you can get cajoled into it by your friends. But having something that you can label, that a group of people that aren't even necessarily people that you know, but that everyone knows about, say, hey, no, I'm not having any alcohol because I'm doing dry January, along with, millions of other people. And for the most part, people are, oh yeah, yeah, makes sense. Let me get you a lemonade or whatever. It's something that gives you that extra sort of boost and that extra friend group connection, even if they're not people that you know directly. It's a helpful group of people that are standing behind you and with you, and that there will be somewhere you can check in with them on Facebook or whatever. It's really, really helpful. Like you say, it is an important part, isn't it?
Anna Lemke also shared some examples of this where, let's say, for example, you are trying to be on your phone less, or you're trying to be puzzling less. I can't imagine. But that it is, again, easy just to substitute in another form of distraction or another escape from that discomfort or whatever. And she talked about, for example, she and her husband both had to work on kind of putting down their other behaviors and connecting during that time. So using that positive social support, that positive connection as being part of what helps satisfy the need for something. And again, if we can decrease the reward value of the substance or the behavior, we can increase, it's actually really nice to talk to my husband about our day each night or whatever. I think is really important in this as well. And as you kind of highlighted, some of it will be direct support that you get, and some of it might be online. Something we didn't have in the past, but something that's been so important for so many people in different types of recovery and challenging work that they're doing. I remember when I was a therapist, I had a client that we were working on some PTSD that he had a really hard time accepting, because he thought, look, I wasn't in the war. He didn't feel like his responses were justified, until he joined an online messaging board. This was in the past a bit, so I don't remember, but back when those were kind of the new thing. And he started to hear other people experience things that he experienced, and other people were struggling with symptoms that he was struggling with. And it really helped normalize it for him. not feeling shame about it. And even though, he never met any of these people in person, he knew he was understood. He knew he could relate to them. And it was really an important part of his movement forward and healing. So, I think that co-regulation, connecting with others around these things is really important.
Yeah, and I think working on filling the void, I can't remember who it was I was talking about the other day, who was talking about the importance of filling the void created. And it's worth planning that out, especially if it's this time that's freed up. And like you say, if you find yourself with that time, and her talking about then you find yourself being bored, is to actually think about that and plan it as part of the strategy. Part of that withdrawal strategy is think of some, fun things to do that you're not likely to get the cross addiction problem. But that whole abstinence piece as well, I was just nodding so vigorously along to that. And really, really thinking about and being honest about what you can handle and what you can't. How many times do I mention crack zero? I know the score with that. I've tested it enough times. I know exactly what will happen if I probably just have one. And so I don't. But other things I have found that I thought were on a similar level, actually, when I've gone out without them for long enough, with any kind of regularity, and when I do have them again, I sort of every time it's like, I do like them. I don't like them as much as I thought I did. And so they are something that I can have from time to time and actually find that I'm having less and less frequently because I don't enjoy them as much as I thought I used to. So, but a lot of that you can only find out by testing the boundaries. So, although it's a kind of a little bit of a dangerous thing to do, I think, that is part of the learning experience. It certainly has been part of mine. And I suppose it does depend what your substance of choice is and how dangerous that is. So it doesn't apply to everything, but yeah.
Absolutely. I'm guessing this will not be our last time that we ever talk about dopamine, but I think this is just some real kind of tangible things that we can work on. And using that reset mentality, I think, is really important. I know often I will see someone post on social media that they're taking a 30-day reset or something. And I think I used to kind of roll my eyes when I would see that, but I really do see the value in it.
Yeah, for sure. And yes, you've got me thinking about, especially her talking about romance novels. That's not actually one of my addictions, but it has got me thinking of some of the things that I do that, you would kind of laugh about, but kind of thinking, actually, they're not necessarily what I call a level of addiction, but they are starting to interfere with how productive I am, maybe, and I'm just getting a little bit too obsessed with some things or just doing them too much. So you've got me thinking about quite a little list of things that I maybe need to take a bit of a break from, even just to test the theory. So you've got me thinking again, Terri.
Mission accomplished.
I'm going to go and try it out. Yeah. Very, very interesting. And yes, I've written myself a little to-do list. Thanks for that.
You bet. Anytime.
Well, until we see each other again, I hope you and everyone at home has a very wonderful week.
Take good care, everyone.